Hello, I have received numerous questions in response to my previous video made for College of DuPage um, as just trying to help out my colleagues. Um, and I am going to answer some of those questions with this video. So let's start by looking at screen sharing. So I preferred screen sharing approach. It takes a little time after you turn that on for the screen to come up. Now, we see this infinite screens effect because the window showing the screen sharing is on there. There are a number of reasons for that. It's the simplest, most straightforward way to share content with students. Once you turn screen sharing on, it's as if you have the projector on in your classroom. And then anything that you wish to share is just like sharing something using the projector in your classroom. So let's get into it. Start slideshow. This way, all the controls that you're familiar with from Microsoft PowerPoint, they still work. So let's take a look at the agenda. Official Blackboard training info is what I'm going to give you, or where you can find that. We're going to talk about the blank screen error that some people have gotten, screen sharing versus uploading PowerPoints, a look at the minimum hardware setup I will use and what hardware setup is truly minimal by looking at what else Collaborate will run on, and we'll try to prepare for the fact that not everything will go as expected, and the unexpected can be fun and can lighten up the mood depending on how you look at it. So Blackboard training information. This was very helpfully shared on the email listserv by Professor Christine Monnier. I hope I'm saying your name correctly. But the college will be having official training on how to do all of this and in-person help. I've shared this on YouTube, so if whatever college you work for will be having similar training, by all means take advantage of it. And don't be afraid to reach out to your colleagues. We all have to pull together and help each other through this difficult moment. So the blank screen error that some of you reported is most likely due to server maintenance or the servers being overwhelmed. Let's remember every single school has changed to online distance learning as much as possible. So that means that the servers are going to experience many times their usual amount of traffic. If it's a server error, all you can really do is call off class. But before you determine that it's a server error, there are some things you should do, just some basic internet troubleshooting. And this goes for any website that's not working. Try hitting the reload or refresh button on your browser and wait for the page to reload. If that does not work after a few tries, try using the private browsing mode of your browser to log in and load the page. This loads a fresh copy of all of your files. Try using a different browser like Firefox. Try using Google Chrome. Try using the newer version of Microsoft Edge, which you see me using. Just try a different browser. Try using a different computer if one is available. I have 2 different computers that I could use for this particular task. If all of that fails, then it's likely a problem on the server side of the connection and you can't do anything about it. If you try all of these steps, then you will have ruled out any possibility that it's, a problem on your end. And once again, if you have any questions and want to walk through in person with someone for how to get set up, the college is going to be having training events on this. please attend them. And also look at the documentation for Blackboard. There's plenty of help for Blackboard Collaborate Ultra available. So this has been done in screen sharing mode so far. This has advantages and disadvantages. Namely, the advantage is you're using the same application that you're used to. So if you know how to present using PowerPoint, you don't have to learn anything new. If you like to give notes for your class using something like Microsoft OneNote, apparently that needs to update, of course. Whenever you want to show people things, it needs to update. Come on. It will just work. You know, everything that you were doing will be there, and you don't need to learn anything new. You can just pick up with what you were teaching like this never happened. That is assuming you use the computer in the way that I do, even for in-person classes. But there are certain disadvantages as well. Now, I'm using an account that I have set up that's just for teaching from on my Surface Pro. I even have a different wallpaper for it. And this is because using my personal account, there was always a risk some personal information of mine could be exposed. You have to protect yourself and your information. Now, with screen sharing, there's also a risk that you could accidentally click something like the grade book and share student information. So you need to be very careful not to do that. But that's also a possibility when using PowerPoints and the projector at school. So it's not really any more of a risk than using PowerPoint at school. Now let's take a look at sharing files using Collaborate Ultra. I've uploaded this very same PowerPoint, and let's see how it looks. Let's see if there's any difference. So it appears to work in a pretty straightforward manner. There are controls at the top of the screen. I can't both show you the file and also show you these controls, but they allow us to do things. For example, it is possible to write on a PowerPoint. And since someone is going to ask how I'm doing that, I have a computer that is designed for this. So please excuse the condition of my room. So basically, this computer, the Surface Pro, is very good at this type of work. There are less expensive devices that can also do it. This is, I don't like though that, one thing I don't like about this is you can't just erase a little bit. Either you erase everything, you don't erase anything. So this is my handwriting. And you can see it's atrocious. But I can use it. So if you're used to writing by hand, and maybe for the long term, if you don't already have a device like this, you should consider getting one to use for your teaching. Okay, moving right along. Let's go back to the PowerPoint. So those are the advantages and disadvantages of uploading your PowerPoints. A good advantage of this is there's no way you could accidentally share student information. The disadvantage is you have to learn a new application. Now, questions about hardware. There have been a few questions about that. My webcam, or any webcam and mic will do in an emergency. However, it's best to have a headset if you want clear audio and for your voice. This is the headset I use, a Logitech H800. It is probably overkill uh, just for teaching. I use it for things like gaming, playing video games. This is a Best Buy Insignia headset that cost about 12 bucks. This will do. And also another option is something like this. These are my Bluetooth earbuds that I use with my smartphone. They also connect to my Surface Pro with Bluetooth. This can work. If you have a Bluetooth for your phone, it can also connect with a laptop that has Bluetooth. It's best to have a webcam that is separate from the one on your laptop. For example, this webcam can be presented or positioned so that you're looking at eye level at me, whereas the webcam on my laptop is looking at me from below. And when looking at someone's face from below, you're kind of looking up at their nose. It's not a flattering angle for anybody. And that might seem like, why would you care? Well, imagine you're the student and you have to look up somebody's nose for an hour or more. Yeah. Now, as for Blackboard Collaborate on other platforms, I'm going to cut a video in here that I recorded separately from this session where I show you Blackboard Collaborate Ultra on Kubuntu Linux. Linux is a alternative operating system to Windows, is very similar to OS X, and an Android smartphone. Suppose your smartphone is all you have, and now you have to teach from it. Can you even do it? And the answer is yes, but there are some differences I want to make you aware of. So I will cut that video in, so you're going to see a jump cut after this, and we'll come back. Now we all know what Blackboard Collaborate looks like and can do in Windows. Let's take a look at it on some other computing platforms. For example, suppose what you have available isn't a nice Surface Pro that you can dedicate to your work. Suppose all you have is a smartphone. You can access most of the same resources through a smartphone, and it has certain advantages. A lot of modern websites are actually optimized for smartphones, and most everything will work. Let's take a look at Blackboard Collaborate. Now, one of the disadvantages of using something like Blackboard Collaborate or any productivity tool on a smartphone comes from the fact the screen is so small and you have to use your big fingers to point at things. They will work. So let me go to my class, Foundations of College Math 2. Now I'm on my house's Wi-Fi, but it would work just as well over the cellular, though streaming might not be quite as smooth. I press this icon up here, see this one right here. That will bring up the menu side, and I can go to where I've put Blackboard Collaborate Ultra, launch it, and it begins to load up. Now, it might actually be easier to use this in landscape mode, because then it looks pretty much exactly like the interface we had on desktop. Okay, going course room, and taking a little bit of time. Just sit through it together and see how it goes. While I'm on this, one very real possibility for why this might happen is it may be due to, they say it's due to connectivity issues. If the website is slammed with a lot of traffic, it might not be able to keep up. Let's remember, all sorts of classes that used to be taught in person are now being taught online. So, okay, it can hear me just fine. This is only using the microphone that's in the phone. Allow it to use my camera. Allow. You have to accept those permissions. So this is the view through the camera that's built into my phone. This is the infamous selfie cam that many people criticize their millennial age and Zoomer students for using so much. But you're going to kind of look like you're taking a very long selfie and talking on FaceTime to people, but well, that's basically what you're doing. Could also use the rear-facing camera. It's even higher quality, but then you can't see what you're doing. Okay, so if I this X here. Now, some people said they don't get this start tutorial thing coming up. That could be because a lot of people were on the website at the same time. Remember, this is a web application, so it's not an application running on your device. It's running on a server somewhere out there in the world. That's why it can work almost as well on a phone as on a computer. That's why it almost doesn't matter what you're running it on. So let's see, I could record the session from here. I could use all the same sharing options. I could share, it says share application unavailable. So that might be one thing you can't do on your phone. And that actually is not a bad thing, in my opinion. One thing about the phone is all sorts of notifications come up on the phone. And you never know when something that might be a little too personal pops up. Sharing files and sharing a blank whiteboard are available, however, so we can do that. Sharing out of the way. Programming. Let's see, can I make this bigger? Yes, I can. And it's a little hard to draw on. Well, let's say you just want to demonstrate an equation or two. So you can show some math on this. Now, obviously it's limited, but if it's all you've got, this can be made to work, especially if you're just presenting your PowerPoint and paging through it with the students. Some of them may even appreciate the fact that you're doing it from a phone, since in many cases, a very high-end smartphone might be all they have as well. Now let's take a look at this using a technology called Linux. In order to do this and also record the experience for you, I'm using the same software that I did for yesterday's video. I used something called OBS to use hardware encoding for the video, and my full-blown desktop PC. And I'm not going to cut this out because it illustrates a point that I'm going to make later in this presentation. Be prepared to accept that the fun and unexpected will happen. Your camera falling, or your small child coming into the room and asking what you're doing. So let me use virtualization to load an alternative operating system up called Linux. Usually I run this natively. Now, what I'm talking about right here is not anything you need to do, but I just want to demonstrate how this OS can also be used. In fact, I may cut the explanation out. Now let's take a look at this in Linux. I'm using a distribution version of Linux called Kubuntu, but this should work in any major version of Linux. And I'm even going to use an alternative web browser just to see if it'll work. Now this is going to run a little slower because I'm actually not running pure Linux. I'm using something called virtualization to run Linux inside Windows. You don't need to worry about those details, but just excuse the slowness that you're about to see. .cod.edu. Training material from another institution I work with on You can imagine how powerful my desktop computer is if it can run a completely different operating system and do high quality video recording at the same time. It's totally overkill for online teaching. This backs up my assertion that you don't need a very expensive or powerful computer in order to do this. Even a relatively inexpensive device that costs a few $100s or maybe even less is sufficient. For that matter, even some of the weaker computers on campus should also be sufficient. Or if you have an older computer, you might just need to update some of the software on it. A newer operating system, newer web browser, that might also be sufficient. So let's take a look at how this looks in Linux. Let's see if it will just work. Now, it's probable that video sharing won't work because I'm using virtualization and I have not given direct hardware access to Linux. When you create sessions, by the way, just as an aside, when you create sessions, by the way, like I did, I'm pretty sure once the appointed time comes, this is where your students are going to click. The course room that's just generally unlocked appears to be a meeting room that is available at all times. So I'm going to load up, it's going to take time, and well, what do you know? Not only has it loaded up, it also seems to remember what I had done on my phone. This also answers a question. If you do something on a device like a smartphone, how would it look to a student who's viewing it on a computer? Apparently, it will look just fine. This is taking some time to load up, again, probably because I'm using a virtualization technology to run Linux. But I do want to, I'll probably cut out this loading time in the actual video, so if you see a jump cut, that's the reason. I do want to see if this is going to work. Oh, see. Now what I was waiting for, apparently it's waiting for me to give it permission to access a microphone, and it's going to skip the audio test for now, and permission to use a camera. Skip audio test, skip video test, tutorial later. Yes. Okay, so let's see what's available, what's working. Apparently, I could share everything up to and including sharing my entire screen. And everything's probably going slowly because I'm using Linux. And I'm also using it virtualized and running inside another OS at the time. Probably what is the cause of that? But I think I've demonstrated the principle that this will work with pretty much any computing platform you could possibly be using. And even if you took a device less than half the power of the computer that I have there, you would be able to make this work. Now, I do want to give a word on computers like this. I have a similar computer, actually identical, that I use for a different task that I do, managing labor relations for another local. And I like to keep, and it's a good practice to keep your worlds as separate as possible. Also note, I only use Linux for scientific work, so I will probably use it for my broadcasting, and my Surface Pro with its account that is specifically for business. I'm also going to use that. And the reason I do that is because you never know what might pop up on your screen. So after making that video, I conclude a few things. It runs on Android with a few limitations, namely you can't do screen sharing. So if you only have a phone to work with, you need to upload your files to Blackboard Collaborate Ultra so you can share them. You can annotate on the screen if you have an Android phone like a Samsung Note or similar that has an active stylus, but it can work with your big fat finger if it has to. It will work fully in an alternative OS and browser like Linux. Linux is very similar to iOS and Unix. It will work on an older or less powerful computer. I ran it on Linux using something called virtualization, which basically takes the power of my desktop computer, divides it by 2, and uses it to run 2 completely separate operating systems. So a computer less than half as powerful as the one that I use for things like playing video games can absolutely do this. And a best practice would be to have separate accounts for teaching if possible, a laptop dedicated just to the job of teaching. For example, I have my Surface Pro with 2 accounts. One that is just for teaching is the one I take with me everywhere. I take it to work, and a personal account that I do light computing on. I have my desktop computer. I use Linux for work and Windows for play. And I also have a computer that is only used for union work. So as a union representative, if I have to do anything heavier than write an email, that's the computer that happens on. That way, everything stays compartmentalized. Another good reason for that compartmentalization, especially now, in a way, when I'm using the work account on my computer, it's like I'm at work. By not using that account when I'm not working, I can mentally separate myself from being at work without having to physically go somewhere else. And also, many people find it helpful to have an area of their house, either a full-blown home office or a particular table or nook or corner of the house, of a room, that they use just for their work, if they work from home in the manner we're about to be asked to. That way you can keep your work life, your work persona separate. And also you can make that work area at least somewhat organized and nice looking. Other than the yoga mat in the background, notice the background here is pretty plain vanilla, not like a too shocking color. And as I said before, I've even made whiteboard walls out of all of these walls. I could even like reach back and write on that wall back there if I had to, as a an extra bit of teaching space. But you don't need to go to those lengths. If you have that, that's fine. But if you don't, that's perfectly fine. Now let's take a look at how when things go wrong, they don't necessarily have to have gone bad. And to show this, I may need to go to screen sharing instead. One disadvantage this brings up about doing PowerPoint here in Blackboard Collaborate without screen sharing is if you want to put a video in it, that video won't play. Apparently that will not work. So let me go and share the screen. So share application / screen. So it takes a little while for you to switch over. Also good to be mindful of that lag time. Remember, this is a web-based application, so you have to communicate with the servers for everything. And this was a sort of cute viral moment from a ways back. Yeah, okay.
Scandals happen all the time. The question is, how do democracies respond to those scandals?
And what will it mean for the wider region?
See, this
I
guy
think one of your children has just walked in. I mean, shifting sands in the region. Do you think relations with the North may change?
The BBC, and his daughter comes in.
I would be surprised.
And his little baby comes in, and they just want to be with Dad. And the mom comes in and drag them out. They just want to be with their daddy.
What's this going to mean for the region?
I imagine some of you who have kids, pretty much we all have family.
North Korea.
You just sort of have to gracefully take the fact that your family might come in and wonder what you're doing, who you're talking to, or something of that nature. There might be background noise. Your students will also have the same things happen. So we all need to just sort of gracefully take that as that man just did. And, just take it as the lighter moment that it is, okay? And try to look on the bright side of this situation. Those of us who may have to stay in and keep separate to control this thing, we get to stay in and be with our families. Okay. So if you have any further questions, again, the best place to go is to the training sessions that are going to be held. If you want to ask me a question, please do so below this video in the YouTube comment section, where we can have a collaborative discussion where other people can contribute what they know, because I'm by no means an expert on everything, There's plenty I don't know, and there's plenty of wisdom in all of you. So let's share that wisdom together and get through this. Thank you.